Okay. So, yeah, I asked at the beginning of the semester why students are in this course. The overwhelming response was it's a requirement. That being said, I like teaching, and I think that this can very much add a repertoire of knowledge and um, particularly, I know that you're business students and stuff, and so I don't know that necessarily any of you would take a position where you would have to be writing queries or dealing with these sort of low-level things. Maybe you are more interested in being a manager or something. But that being said, having an understanding of the way that things work, be it that it's your day job or that you're overseeing other people, being able to speak the same vocabulary as them, and being able to hire the right people or people who are under you. Are they doing the right kinds of things? I mean, how experienced are they in this kind of thing? And so just being able to assess that is not so easy. And that's sort of the way that I've been trying to approach this course, from fundamentals of data structures, algorithms, to what's involved in a query, what are relational databases, and what does it all mean. So this, I've hoped that throughout the time of this course, that you would get something valuable from it, despite the fact that maybe you're not participating out of a choice. But yeah, I hope that you're able to get something useful out of it. So the idea of making a final project that is weighted so heavily, 40% of your grade, is that hopefully it's something that at least you can add to your resume, basically. I mean, you take lots of courses, you um, work for your grades, and at some point, for most of you, very soon, you'll be graduating. And maybe you've already applied to jobs, you had interviews, maybe you've already been accepted. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that there's a spectrum of where you guys are at. But I personally would consider it a success for you participating in this course to add something to your resume that will make you stand out. Um, be that in a very direct way, because um, um, you'll be either doing or overseeing people who work with databases, or otherwise, yeah, just sort of padding your resume. And so that's the point of this project. The point for me is for you to be able to write on your resume something coherent that hits that checks off certain boxes of things that employers look for. And were you to be questioned for more details, that you are not going to be completely lost. So that's the way that I've been approaching this semester teaching this section. Um, so um, the high level view, I sent out an announcement about this, trying to make some things more concrete and also give some type of direction, I guess, about what this whole final project thing is about. What it's about is for you to be able to add something beneficial to your resumes. Beneficial here means you are aware of the environment and the cloud. I'll maybe speak a little bit more about this, but what is, cloud computing and cloud stuff? This is relatively new, like within the last decade. Amazon was the first with AWS. Microsoft Azure, I'll talk more about this, is what I suggest using in this class solely because it doesn't cost you anything. You can use AWS. You can use Google Cloud. There's a lot of different cloud services. Those are the big three. I mean, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. And of these three, only Microsoft allows for a path to have everything be completely free to you for the length of this course. So that's why I will be focusing on Microsoft Azure. That being said, that's not a requirement. It's just for most people this class, I figured that free is nice. But maybe you have opportunities or something that would be better to have some experience with AWS or Google or something else. In which case, I'm perfectly happy to have you work in that realm. And unfortunately, during class time, if this is you, I won't be covering it, the specifics of how to set things up. But if that's you, let me know. And yeah, that would be something that if you have some extra available time, we can discuss it outside of class, in time for you know. I mean, at some point, I have to give you a grade, so it has to be finished by the time that I'm required to have things where I can assign such a grade. Okay, so the main things that I think a project like this can benefit you by is creating a database in some cloud-based system. And not only is there a database, but that database is accessible by some other service. In a previous semester, I required students to kind of do both. They would make a database, and then they'd also make a web server that could interact with the database. And you could learn, I mean, the whole thing is a really good learning opportunity. But this semester, I feel like that, yeah, maybe that's diverging a bit too much and asking a bit too much. There's a small segment of students that would be interested in the details of this larger kind of system. But for this semester, you just have to do the database part. I will be writing a web server that will need access to your database, as is standard in the industry. I mean, people who manage databases and write queries and stuff like this, they're not the same people who make a front end to make it easy to interact with the database. So I'm doing that part, and it's really not um, a whole lot that you need to do. I mean, basically, for this class, this semester, you handle the database. And in order to make that accessible to some other service, there's four things that are needed. There's the server that the service can connect to. There's the database name. Once some third party knows where to go via the address, they also know the name of the database that they'll be accessing. And then there's a username and a password for the database that um, uh, any third party should have. I mean, if there's a database that exists and people are able to access it, you should restrict who has the ability to access the database. Excuse me. Because, I don't know, you don't want any sort of Joe Schmo to get in your database and, I don't know, delete stuff, add stuff, have fun, or some nation state to do more complicated things, whatever. So that's the reason for a username and password. And so with those four things, after you set up the database and you make them available, that is, again, the um, the address of the computer that this third party is connecting to. It's the name of the database that they want to use, and then a username and a password in order to either access it or modify it. So your job will be, for this final project, to create a database on a cloud system and then provide these four pieces of information so that a separate entity has access to and can interact with the database. That's it. That's what I want you to do for this final project. Yeah, that on those are the things that you will be graded on. Do you have a database in the cloud that you are able to make accessible to other people? That's how you'll be graded. That being said, despite the fact that I know that for many of you who've enrolled in this course, it was not an option, I want, outside of that I've already said, I don't really have so many requirements. What I would prefer, what I would like, just as an individual, is that somehow you're able to find some interest in it. I mean, like, what information does this database provide? And if that's interesting to you, it just makes your life easier, because now it's not a boring class that you have to slog through, but it's something that's kind of interesting, and it's not uh, I don't know, an exercise of masochism to go through. So for this, I don't have really any requirements as far as what data interests you. What ways might this type of project be something valuable for you? I hope, and I would personally, as a human, enjoy you getting something more than padding your resume. But I don't know. Maybe that's all that, given your circumstances, that's what this class is for, and I can feel comfortable given the homeworks and assignments and other things that you've done that you are not going to be an incompetent, horrendous employee. You should know. Yeah, I don't know. Like you guys are in school, educating yourselves, and hopefully you have a gainful employment. I would find it a personal failing if one of you end up in some position where you make horrible decisions, you don't know what's going on, and you but you were given that position because of your degree or whatever. To I like to think that this process of obtaining a college degree avoids these types of things in the world. So don't freak out. Don't worry about me being harsh with grading or things like this. Mainly, I mean, the bare minimum here to get a good grade, if that's what you care about, is making a database in the cloud that is accessible by some third-party service. And you'll get marks for that. Yeah, I like to think that as a student, at least when I was an undergraduate student, I actually wanted to learn things and to be knowledgeable and um, uh, this kind of thing. So, okay, that's my spiel. I hope that you guys get something out of this course, even if it's not what uh, the path that you want to take. But should you be in a position of some kind of authority, I would feel disappointed to know that one of you, I see it sometime, be making horrible decisions or um, really, really missing the mark on how things work. Or, you want to work with competent people. How do you evaluate that? Even if it's not you yourself who's doing it, you need to have some type of knowledge to be able to assess other people who you're working with. How competent are they? Okay, so that's it. Uh, okay, so that's the high level. What is the point of this project? How will I be grading you? It's going to be pretty lenient. As I said, if you can, in order to get a good grade in this course, make a cloud, make a database that's in the cloud, make it accessible to a third party. You do those things, you'll get a good grade. If you can't do those things, that's a really big problem, and you won't get a very good grade. But everything else are details. So in addition to this, with my hope that there's something here where at least taking this course can be relevant or interesting to you, I'm I have reservations about giving a really demanding step by step, this is what you must do in order to receive a grade. I prefer it to be kind of a bare minimum. If you're graduating, like, at least I can hopefully feel comfortable that I'm not releasing you into the world with a degree where you're going to destroy things. Basically, that's my motivation. Um, but aside from that, any way that you can make it interesting. There's lots of ways to do this. I really want to be flexible about, and I don't really feel comfortable giving strict guidelines. Um, for example, maybe there's data that you find interesting, and you would like to make a database that holds this information. In the real world, there's a lot of messy data, and going through the work of cleaning the data and putting it in an accessible database for yourself or for others is by itself a big contribution. And maybe that's what you do. You're not doing anything crazy with queries or this kind of thing. Maybe how you spent most of your time is dealing with a real pain of a situation of just creating a database that has information available. That would make me happy, and that is also that's an option for you. Maybe this information is already accessible, but you want to probe the information. You're curious about, now that you know this, for, I don't know, I mean, just throwing it out there because it's prescient, COVID data. I don't know. There's lots of resources that make information accessible for this. And maybe you're curious. Maybe you just want to load all of this information into a database and play around with writing some queries. Like, is this a reasonable statement, or who are the people who have been affected in some specific way? And so you spend a lot of time not throwing the information in a database, but you spend a lot of time thinking about how to query the database to get certain results back, and then how you interpret those results. Yeah, that might be a path that's interesting to you. So for these things, I'm not going to, in this class, and I'm sorry if this is frustrating for you, but I'm not giving strict requirements for this type of thing. The only thing that is going to affect your grade is making a database that is not using sample data. In fact, today I'll go through creating a database on Azure where you can throw in some sample data, which is a good thing to have a database with stuff in it that you can practice queries with. Don't turn in that sample database as your final project. But anything else, I mean, it could be you're dealing with a large amount of data. Maybe you're dealing with a small amount of data, and it was valuable to you, that exercise, and here's why. And the whole here's why thing, that is this 500 word, one page something essay about what you did. So besides making the database exist and making it available to some third-party service with those 4 pieces of information, again, server name, database name, username, password. Aside from that, write a report. Doesn't have to be very long. It could be a page. That's about 500 words, about what you did, what you learned from it, why you found it was interesting, whatever. Just make it coherent, and you will get a good grade in this course because of that. I, in addition to that, hope that you can make a project your own. Is the option of working with a partner still available? Yes, of course. But, okay, so two things. One, you have to let me know who you're working with. Um, because if I'm receiving information about one database that's accessible, who shall I um, assign the grade to for this? So you need to let me know who you're working with. The other thing is that um, the written reports, uh, they can be separate or they can be combined. But if you're working in a group, you have to justify why it took more than you yourself to do. That is my view of fairness. Some people can work in a group, other people aren't working in a group. And if you're not in a group, you can strictly do fewer things because you're limited by the number of people. So if you're working with another person, it should be because of some reason. And I don't want to specify what that reason is because, again, I want to give you guys flexibility. Maybe it's compiling the data is a real pain. Just putting it in the database, getting, like here's this data that we had access to. It was a big mess, and we migrated it into a database. And that took a lot of work. That would have been hard for one person. So we had more than one person. Or maybe it's one person was happy with throwing in, putting the data in the database, but then you had another person who was really interested in probing the data and coming up with certain queries that they found interesting. And that's a really good coupling. One person who understands the sort of technical aspects of making the database, another person who's really interested in the queries, and given access to data, they can figure things out or what have you. Um, I'm sorry that I can't give, not can't, but I won't give um, strict things for you to follow for this. But what I can say is that in my view of fairness, um, for those people who are working in a group, somehow the result of that it has to stand out from somebody else who is just one person working on it. I mean, there has to be some difference between those two for me to feel comfortable um, feeling like it's an even playing field. Maybe some people like working alone. Maybe they um, uh, have trouble finding a partner or whatever. And I want to be fair to all of these students. To me, my sense of fairness is groups of people have to do something more substantial. I'm not going to specify what that is. That could be very dependent on the circumstances of the group. But I'll say that much. If you're working in a group, justify why you couldn't do this by yourself, but you needed an extra person or other people. Groups cannot exceed 3. I think that's reasonable for this class. You can have 1 or 2 or 3, but if you have 2 or 3, justify why that was necessary.
Professor.
Yes.
So let's say I'm just up in the air with this partner. Thing. How bad do you think the penalty would be if per se the project is complete, but you don't see that extra amount of work that you're expecting for a duo to complete? Like how would that affect the grade precisely?
It's an abstract and also specific question. Is the option of working with a partner still available? Yes, I've already answered that. For the 500-word report, can we submit this as a group? You can. You can. Uh, but again, I mean, like somehow for me, it has to come across that even though I'm receiving one report from a team, that it's more substantial than a report returned to me by somebody who was not a part of a team. Otherwise, each team member can write their own report about what they did, what they were thinking, this kind of thing. If you're not doing that, again, I think this is a reasonable thing. I mean, somehow, and I don't know how to quantify it exactly, but if you're in a group of 2 or 3 people and you're turning in a report, it should be easy to understand that the single report by many people is more substantial than if I received a single report from any one given member. Again, I don't exactly know how to quantify that, but uh, I don't know. I'll I'll know it when I see it, kind of thing. I don't know. That's yeah. I
Professor,
Go ahead.
could we go over a quick example of the database that you would want us to make or like show us something that has to do with the project?
Yes. So that is the rest of this lecture that I need to get into right now. This is a really much longer time that I've spent talking than I expected. So, okay, I remember saying a week or two ago, please try to create a student Azure account. There's some problems with that, and I don't know if people have done that or have done this already. But there is an issue that we might run into, which is in order to create the Microsoft Azure account with the $100 student credit, I don't think you can create an account using your Scarlet Mail. You have to use your Connect account. So some of you might have jobs in, OIT, or you have a business.rutgers.edu email address, something like this. I've heard of issues that some students have trying to just use their Scarlet Mail address. So if you are unable to create a Microsoft Azure account, you have to let me know. Just send me an email. I will try to work on, maybe there's a way that I can use my own account and I can create a user for these people who aren't able to create accounts themselves, but via my account, they are able to create, modify, whatever the stuff would be able to do. So if you have a problem with this, you have to let me know, okay? Because uh, yeah, I mean, like if you're having these sort of technical problems, I mean, like um, that's a barrier to being able to really do anything. And I want to address that as early as possible. So, um, assuming that you have an Azure account, the rest of this lecture is going to be how to create a database. Um, uh, I believe that you should install a program on your computer for the Azure client. This is different on Mac and it's different on Windows. So let me do this now. If you are using Windows, the easiest thing for you to do, follow that link, download the Azure CLI, that's for client, current version. It will be a file, a .msi file, that stands for Microsoft Installer. Once you download it, double-click it, or open it, whatever, and it will launch an installer program that will install the Azure client on your Windows computer. If you are on a Mac, you open up the terminal program, spelled that way, sorry, without the backslash, terminal. Open up the terminal program and type brew update and brew install Azure-CLI. Brew is a application manager for Mac. It stands for homebrew. There was somebody who brought up, brew refers to homebrew. So there's something called homebrew, which is just an application manager. If you use an iPhone, for example, and you want to download an application, you use the iStore. If you're on Android, you use the Play Store to install applications. Whatever. It's an application whose job is to install other applications. That's what homebrew is for Mac. I don't use a Mac. My understanding is that this should be default or installed by default. But if you do not, if you try to write BREW, brew, in the terminal and you get an error, then on your Mac system you might have to install homebrew. And after that, you should be able to run this command from your terminal. It says command not found when I try to do it. So you are on a Mac? Is that right? Okay. So I really thought that this was something that was just there by default, but okay, there we go. Actually, this webpage is very good. So if you go here, there is one command you should be able to copy, paste in your terminal. It will download homebrew, it will install it, and after that, you can run the brew command. So what this is, be you on Mac or on Windows, if you're running Linux, also let me know, because I don't think most people are running Linux, but that the instructions will be different if you're on Linux. Okay, what this does is this installs the Azure client on your computer. So the Azure client, again, I'm suggesting using Azure. If for some reason you want to use Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Google Cloud, or something else, I don't know, maybe you have like your own home server that you want to do. If you have some reason to not use Azure, also let me know. That being said, everything else will just be assuming that we're using Azure. So, Azure is a cloud-based computing system. What this means is that there are physical computers located at different locations around the world. There's a few different big buildings on the East Coast, on the West Coast, in the Midwest, or in Asia, or in Europe, or whatever. These are like they're buildings that these big companies buy, There's big computers that they put there, and they connect the internet to them such that people from anywhere, really, can via the internet connect to this computer, like the physical computer that's located at wherever this warehouse is. Maybe it's New York, maybe it's Los Angeles, whatever. And people pay for the resources that they use. There's lots of different services that are available for the cloud. Do you want to use a computer that has a fast GPU because you want to game on the cloud, or you want to do machine learning on the cloud? Do you need something that has an intensive CPU because you're going to be crunching a whole lot of numbers? Or do you want something with lots of hard drive space because you have a lot of data that you want to store and make accessible to other things? There's a lot of services that are a part of these cloud computing things. For this class, we are concerned about the storage ones for databases. So the point of installing this Azure client is that now on your local computer, probably a laptop, I guess, um, your computer via this program is able to communicate with some servers that Microsoft runs if you're using Azure. So your laptop, I'm assuming it's a laptop, is going via the internet to communicate with some server that Microsoft has. And the language that they're using to go back and forth is the reason for this client on your computer. That way, your computer speaks the same language as whatever the server is. That's why you need to install this. Microsoft says you can use Scarlet Mail. Are you sure it's our Connect one? So that's what I heard in the other class. I'm not sure. For me, I'm using my Connect account. If you're able, actually, that's a good point. If you're able to use your Scarlet Mail account and you get things working, I'll give you extra credit. If you can write down the steps that you went through to get things working, yeah, write them down, let me know, and I'll throw you some extra credit your way for your contribution to this class and other sections. Okay. Now, before I was talking about the terminal or bash, this kind of thing. Long story short, I'm going to be skipping that. You can do everything that you need as far as setting up the database through the web browser. And I'll share my web browser, I'll create a database and talk about it. Still, the command line or the terminal, the benefit of it is that it can actually make things a lot easier, a lot shorter. You can write one line, maybe it's long or long-ish, on the command line, and it will set up everything. That's the benefit of working through a terminal or a command line. But because I'm assuming that most people aren't familiar with that way of working, there's a graphical system that you can go through that might seem more familiar. It's more cumbersome if you were creating many different databases or you wanted to make modifications. You will be slower going through this web interface. But I imagine that that will probably be more natural for your background in this course. So that's what I'll go through. That being said, let me share my web browser. I think that one. Very good. Okay. So in your web browser, you can go to portal.azure.com. I'll highlight it here. Portal.azure.com. Once you're there, and this assumes that you have an Azure account, here, Azure Services, there is a SQL databases, and you can create one. It might not be at this exact location because I've created this. I did this yesterday, so I think it's now bumped to kind of the beginning of the list. For you, it might be in a different location here at the top of the page. But in any case, you should see somewhere on this front page on the top here the SQL databases. And go to create. Take a minute. Let me open up my chat. If you have questions, please write them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so this subscription should just be here by default, Azure for Students. This is, again, assuming that you're able to successfully create an Azure account for students. You get a $100 credit just for free every year. Okay, this resource group will be empty. Because this was from yesterday, I'm going to title this BDM, Business Data Management 01, because we are now in the first section. Okay. Database name. What do you want to name the database? Anything you want, really. Anything you want. Fine. Server. You're going to create a new server. So the subscription is the way that you're going to be charged for using this cloud service. The resource group is just a way if you want like many different databases and a web server and I don't know, like lots of stuff. You can kind of package it all under one name. That's what the resource group is. The database name is the name of the database, and the server here, if we create a new server, it'll open up this box sort of to the right here. And this is to say that you are going to be allocated some computational resources. And that for you yourself or for any other third-party application, they know a unique name that refers to the server, the database server, or the computer that is unique to this project. So the server name, you can name it anything you want, but it has to be a name that nobody else in the entire world has used before. So for example, if I type the word test here, we can see that the name test is fine. It doesn't contain any crazy characters, but this name is already in use. Somebody else already named their server test. So just you can add numbers or letters or whatever it is. Just you come up with some unique name that nobody else in the entire world has used. Okay, fine. So that's the name. And now we need to create an administrator. The administrator is the one user who has godlike powers over this database. They can create users, they can create tables, they can delete tables, they can do anything that they want. That's the admin. So create whatever your admin name is, and then you give them a password that you repeat. And then here, the location of the server, again, the whole idea of a cloud system is that there's like a big server farm. It's like a big building with racks and racks of servers. I mean, it's just nothing but computers. It's cooled very well, and it's just, I don't know, it's actually very cool. You can look it up. Whatever. So there's some physical location where there's a building that's cooled very well and has people working there they can actually physically touch the computers. Not you though, but you can request that you want to use a computer at this specific geographic location. For this class, it doesn't matter because the speed isn't really an issue. But if you are working for a company, you want multiple servers. If people are on the East Coast, you want your server on the East Coast. So that way the requests have to travel a physically shorter difference. And so people can interact faster. The same thing if you are servicing people in Europe or people in Asia. It makes sense to have to be occupying computational resources that are physically closer to the users. So for here, you can basically choose whatever you want. For me, I'm in New Jersey, so I'll just choose US East on the East Coast. Doesn't matter though, you can really choose anywhere you want. Or experiment with it, create a few different servers. Maybe you're also on the East Coast, create a server in Asia and see how the two compare. Whatever. You can have fun with it if that's fun for you. Okay. So now I've created the server. The elastic pool we're not going to use. We'll just skip that. Here, the compute and storage. This is the way that you're being charged for the services. You have a $100 credit. This money is going to be spent here. You get to choose how many resources do you want to occupy. How many CPUs, how much hard drive space. Here, because we're creating a database, the relevant piece of information is the storage space. You'll see here V cores. Those are virtual cores, which you can just think about as the number of CPUs. Might not be the physical number of CPUs. They're a virtual CPU, but that's, again, beyond the scope of this course. Just imagine that the number of vCores that you have more CPU power. For the databases that we're working with in this course, you don't need very many. Okay, there's this. Basic, standard, premium servers. None of those are good. You cannot use any of these for a database. The way that the basic, standard, or premium services charge you is it doesn't make any sense for a database. So instead, for this project, for the database, you have to choose one of these, the general purpose, hyperscale, or business critical. The main difference between these is the guarantee in the number of operations that you can do. Like if you are querying the database many times in a short period of time, how quickly can you respond to these requests? And then also what is the network that you're available or that you have access to. So for the general purpose, you could have up to 10 milliseconds of 10 1,000ths of a second or 1/100th of a second that you might need to wait for a response. If you have a business where things have to be going real snappy all the time, you can cut that down to 2 milliseconds. But for this class, I think the general purpose is fine. You can, for this example, I'm going to be doing a serverless tier. So this is just built on how many processors, how many virtual processors you're using. Max cores, min cores, again, I'm just going to keep it at the least available. You will see here that on the right, this is the pricing part. If we are fully using this database 24/7, it will cost you $4.78 a month. You have $100 at your disposal. So you could use this amount of space and run this thing 24/7, and you could do it year in, year out as a student at no cost to you. That being said, this depends on the amount of data that you're using here at the bottom. So if your database doesn't need that much information, you can say I only need 1 gigabyte allocated to me, which throws down the 24/7 monthly cost to 15 cents a month. Like barely anything. Even as a poor student, you can afford that. Maybe. I don't know. Otherwise, if you have a bunch of data and you want to go up to 512 gigabytes that you need for this data, when it's being accessed 24/7, that will use up $76 a month. So if you have a whole bunch of data, you're going to blow through your $100 free credit in a little over a month. Here, you can auto pause, which means that if nobody's accessing your database, and here you have to do it for at least an hour, you can't do it for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. The minimum cutoff is an hour, which means that maybe it's not 24/7 that people are accessing your database. If nobody touches your database for an hour, it powers down, and you get charged 0 until you access it again. Now, this is something also to keep in mind for you. Once you create a database, if you don't access, or if you don't enable this, you can enable the auto pause. In this case, I will be for 1 hour. That means that if I don't touch the database for an hour, it will go to sleep, which means that the next time I try to connect to the database, I need to wait for some time for it to wake up. So if you use this and you exceed this time limit, the next time you try to access your database, it might fail or you'll get some errors, and that's because it's waking up. Give it 1 or 2 minutes, and it will wake up and be normal.
Professor, do we have the option of changing this like further in? Meaning, if we set this, can we come back and like change it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And also, you can create more than one. I mean, in fact, I think I already have like 3 here. I still have the one that I made yesterday. I made another one for testing it before the lecture and stuff. Okay, so after you do this, we can go to networking. This is going to be important. Public endpoint. So, in order for once you create this database, I am writing a web server. You don't need to do that, but I have a web server. And it's just, you can think of it like a web page. And if I want to display the database information from some table, then my web server can query the database, get a response, and then display it in some nice way. But in order to do that, you need to make your server available. So this is what the public endpoint is. This means that anybody in the public can access your server via the server name and these other, the 4 credentials that I talked about. So here you want to say, yes, allow Azure services and resources to access the server. My web server that I'll be making it on Azure. So my Azure hosted web server should be able to access your Azure hosted database. So you'll want to click yes for that. This other one, your current IP address. So whatever computer you're on right now, on the internet connection that you're on right now, you will be able to access this database. Otherwise, you might have to add, other people for access. So enable public endpoint and enable both of these settings. Okay, additional settings. Now, I think that for this weekend, you should do 2 things. You should create 2 databases. Right now, here at the top here, we have 3 choices. One is to create an empty database. Also work on it simultaneously. Yeah, create another user. So you're going to have some administrator account. That administrator can create other users. So you can either create other users, give them access to that account, or you can share the administrator account details with each group member, and everybody can just use the same account to interact with the database. You can do it either way. I don't care about this. I would suggest to create different user accounts just to have that experience. But that's not something that I'll be grading you on. Okay, so this weekend, today's Friday, you can go through this whole process more than one time. I would suggest 2 things. One, create an empty database. None. And then go back to some of our previous lectures and create a table. And try out some of the queries that we have. You can populate, you can insert entries using some of the examples that we went over in class, or you can come up with your own. In any case, a really small table where you can enter in entries manually and then play around with the queries and verify that they do what I said they did. Or if they don't, then you can get very angry at me and you can be very public about it. I don't mind. Otherwise, also create, so I suggest for this weekend you create 2 databases. An empty one that you populate with toy data to test out the specific things that we've talked about in this course. It could be, I don't know, like a person eats, serves, whatever these tables, do that. Also, pick the sample data. That's what we're going to do for here. So the sample, this is some just generic data that you can populate the database with just to get started as quickly as possible. You don't need to change this condition. Azure Defender, you can say no. Basically, hackers are a thing. There are people that try to access databases either to just pull information or to screw up entries, and they're just whatever. For this class, I don't think it matters. So whatever. I mean, like, who cares if somebody hacks your database? If it's a database you care about, go for it. Whatever. Okay, so that's it. Tags. I don't need any tags. Review and create. Okay, so now this is just a review of the settings that we chose, and we can create the database. By the way, I'm sorry, if I need about 5 more minutes, you can go ahead and log off at 1:20 because I don't want to hold you longer than that. But now I've created this database and it's being deployed. So that is on some computer on the East Coast. I'm not exactly sure where. That computer is running now. It's allocating the amount of space that I asked. It's allocating the number of virtual cores that I asked for. And this whole thing will take about 2 minutes. So in the meantime, let me read this. If we make 3 servers, don't we need to stay under the $100 limit for the total of all 3? Yeah, no problem. But again, like if you make the servers with like 1 gigabyte, it's 15 cents a month if you're accessing it 24/7. In fact, I think that the first time you go through this, once this thing is deployed, I'll run a simple query or a couple queries just to show that it works. But then later, like if you walk away for an hour and you try to come back and try to log into your server, assuming that you set up the auto timeout, that login attempt will fail because the computer went to sleep. And now when you're logging back into it, the computer needs a little bit of time to wake up, like 1 or 2 minutes. And then after that, you can use it again. So even if you're occupying more space, I would think it would take a lot of work to blow through your $100 of credit in a month. That would be, I don't know, in fact, maybe I'll give extra credit if you're able to do that. I think it would be very difficult to do. Yeah, you'd have to create servers with lots of space and have something querying it at least once an hour. Okay, great. Here we are. Deployment complete. 2 minutes on the nose. Okay, so once you've created this database, you can go to portal.azure.com, and then you'll see these recent resources. So this is the resource group that if I have many things, I can put them all under this one resource. But what I'm interested in is this SQL database. So I click that, and now I'm interacting with the database. I can see where it's located, how much it's been computing, this kind of thing. And here, the query editor, the preview, it will ask for credentials. I created an administrator account. Let me do that. Log in. Now this logged in just like that. If you ignore this for an hour and you try logging in, you'll get an error because the computer needs to wake up. So don't freak out. Just give it 1 or 2 minutes and log in again. Now here, we can see tables. So for example, this table, select LT address. This is the schema. That's the name of the table, sales lt.address. And this table has this many columns. There's one column named address ID. That's the private key. It's an integer. That's the type. And it cannot be null. In fact, none of these can be null for this example database. This is another column called address line 1. Each of these are the columns. So this shows the schema for the table. Now, maybe we want to see it. So let me do select. Here I'm going to be using star just because it's debugging and I just want to see the information. From the name of the table, sales LT address, and that's a real pain to type all the time, so I'm just going to rename it A. And first of all, it's just as A, whatever. Let's see what this returns. Okay, so here's the table. Address ID, address line 1. Here, address line 2 is mostly blank, city, blah, blah. All these things here, these are the rows. And then here we can actually see the entries of the table. You can do I don't know, here, city, Dallas. Maybe I want all these entries with the city. So I can say a dot city equals Dallas. And I will mention this. It's very important when you're using a string that you use single quotes. Sorry, I misspelled Dallas. So here, if I run this query, there we go. These are the entries that have the city of Dallas. Now, in Python, for example, it doesn't matter if you use single quotes or double quotes. If you try to use double quotes here, it will complain about that column name not existing. So if you're writing a string, be sure to use just single quotes. Okay, so that's it. I hope that, yeah. Oh, you should want to add a user. User SQL add user. I won't go through that now, but there is a website that you can go through. You can also just use Google and Google this stuff. But in any case, now hopefully you're able to create a server. You can play around with, a pre-populated server. Try some queries. See what happens. Create an empty database and then create the tables, insert entries, delete entries, try some of the queries that we did in class. And yeah, you'll be in a very good position to do everything. So, okay, that is it. And thank you guys. I will also be releasing the final later today. That will be due next Thursday, as I announced. And if you run into any problems, if you want to use AWS or Google Cloud, or you can't create an Azure account or anything, please let me know as soon as possible. Because the sooner that things are working for you, the easier life will be for everybody. So that's it. Thank you guys. Sorry to keep you 6 minutes over, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Professor, can I ask you a question?